And now we can finally talk about the game everyone saw in the title of this podcast and why they probably downloaded this and are listening to us for the first time ever. Hi, new listeners. Is you wanted some Majora's Mask content, right?
I guess they did, right?
Yeah. So
they answered us.
Yeah. Majora's Mask came out in April of 2000 in Japan and October of 2000 in North America, just in time for Christmas. And basically, the story behind this game is kind of interesting. After the release of Ocarina of Time, there was a new version of Ocarina of Time set to release for the 64 disk drive. A lot of people call this Zelda because that's how it was printed in magazines, things like that. And that ended up never getting released. It was going to be like remixed versions of the dungeons and maybe a few new items to use, stuff like that. So basically, Eiji Aonuma, is that how you say his name?
It's pretty good.
All right, Aonuma. So Aonuma, one of the dungeon designers for Ocarina of Time, was given a challenge by Shigeru Miyamoto to create a game together. So he had to get this this thing together. In an I Will Asks, he said he admitted not being able to get into the Master Quest project, the Ocarina of Time thing, but he wanted to design new dungeons not in Ocarina of Time at all and started doing them in his spare time. And this led to him basically saying, like, well, I could put these in a whole new game. So Shigeru Miyamoto gave him the challenge and said, you can make a whole new Zelda game if you can get it together within a year. So that explains why this game reuses so many assets from Ocarina of Time, is he had to make this game in a year. And honestly, I don't think that shows. There's some games out there that are rushed through the development process, and you can see it. I think this totally feels like he had as much time as he needed.
This holds up better than games that are in development now for 6 years.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
they release it. It's like, oh, it doesn't work. But yeah, I wish this would. I mean, I guess you couldn't really do it now, and people do mods and everything. But imagine if like the company was like, hey, you know that game that did really well? Yeah. Can you make another one next year, but use the same assets, but make a different game? I don't know if anyone else could do it, because that's what's so cool about it, is it doesn't feel like it's the same assets to me. Like, I mean, I know visually looking at them, it's like, oh, that's this, that's that. But the way they did it, you really wouldn't immediately go, oh, those are bosses from Ocarina of Time that are NPCs now.
Yeah, I really like that they also used unused assets from Ocarina of Time, like stuff that they had made for the game that didn't make it into the game. So things like the Igor statue, which was in every Zelda game up to Ocarina of Time, and then it's for some reason missing from that game. It's like, oh, they did make one, and it's here in Majora's Mask, and you can see what they made for Ocarina of Time there. Kind of like getting to play with unused assets.
And I do like that the linking of the games is so small, because I this is just a thing I wish they would do more, is have games not set in Hyrule.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that would have made Tears of the Kingdom feel a little different if it wasn't in Hyrule. But I like that the only linking factor is the Ocarina. So once you go through the whole thing, and the Skull Kid steals it, and you get it back. Epona, but the main thing is the Ocarina.
Yeah, the main thing. You're right.
You get that back. You remember the Song of Time and everything. So I think the way they built everything in it was really cool. And one of the things I thought was impressive, though, with the emulation, you don't really get it because they take out the fog and stuff. But I feel like Majora's Mask is way more an expressive game than Ocarina of Time. I know that they don't have super detailed models and they can't do all sorts of crazy stuff, but even just like something simple, when you talk to the Happy Mask salesman and they just keep changing what he's doing while he's talking to you.
Oh, and he's just by far one of the creepiest characters of the whole franchise. Like,
it's just unsettling.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that holds up. Or even the way the Skull Kid moves at the beginning, because like I wasn't like, oh, that's actually way creepier than I remember it being.
It's
So
like
I
one of
feel
those
like
J horror movies.
he's
Yeah,
very Japanese horror, and like I said, like you get that cryptic part later where he's like, "Oh, Epona," and you're like, "What did you do to Epona?" Like,
yeah.
but I think it gets the mood so good that you don't even care it's reusing assets, and then the way they structure it really helps it too. Because I mean, you get new dungeons, you get new bosses, so none of that is reused, and I feel like they tell a more interesting story than Ocarina of Time between the time travel and then just the bad guy's not a bad guy for the traditional reasons. So it gives it a little more depth than you would usually get in a Zelda game. And then I know you and I were talking about this, that the masks unfortunately don't do more than what they have you use them for. But even that's just an interesting concept of instead of items necessarily for dungeons, you need specific masks to get through them. So I think that was an interesting direction to go too.
And the marketing for this game was cuckoo bananas. Like insane that Nintendo let them. That only in the '90s, or I guess the year 2000, would they let them market a game like this. Where if anyone out there is unfamiliar, go look up television ads for Majora's Mask. They create this like because of the apocalyptic storytelling that
Mm,
is in the game, they create these ads that look like they're for a disaster movie, and they're really effective. I don't know what it is about them, but they really do elicit some emotion when you're watching them. And it's like, this is just a commercial for a video game. I shouldn't be feeling this much right now.
and
There's
oh yeah, go ahead, Harrison.
no, I was gonna say like there's just tons of emotion in Zelda games. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, because Kevin and I were kind of talking about this too, but I think it's funny. Like the side quests in this game are kind of mundane stuff, but
Mhm.
you're like engaged to do it. So it's not like, oh, you gotta go defeat so and so and get this so you can get in the dungeon. It's no, you gotta go get this thing for this guy so he stops, crying or something.
Right.
Okay.
And you get Kathy's quest in there, which is probably my favorite side quest in any Zelda game. Takes you through every like location practically in the game. It takes you have to do it twice to get the two different rewards at the end. And it's got this powerfully emotional story being told. The story of Kathy's side quest is more detailed than some stories for the main story in some of the Zelda games.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is there's a lot more depth, I guess, to what's going on in
Yeah,
Majora's Mask.
it feels like a real world. Like these people all really, every one of them has, who they are.
But that's another thing where it's like it doesn't feel like a game that was almost made on a dare. Like
Yeah.
there's polish there.
Yeah. I'm not so as far as the time crunch goes, I'm not sure like it's incredibly impressive what you can do they could do with the amount of time they had and the
Oh yeah.
resources they had. But I say it after the fact. So if in a hypothetical I could go back in time and see what a game would have looked like as 3 year development and then they had a 7 day cycle, I think, as you mentioned. Um
I don't think we mentioned it yet, but that is in my notes here. The original loop wasn't 3 days; it was 7 days,
Oh
right. So,
really?
so I don't yes, I don't know like I just
which would have
it's
given
hard
you 7 temples. Like
it's
most
hard to
Zelda
Mhm.
games have.
say it's hard to say after the fact like would it have been any better or worse? All I can say is that I know that with the amount of time given, they made an absolute outstanding game. I'll include here that, I mean, the critical acclaim of the Zelda series is more impressive than any franchise that I know of. Out of the top 50 games in Metacritic, 7 of them are Zelda games, and Majora's Mask is 6 out of those 7
Oh wow.
at number 42.
Yeah, a lot of
So
people did not like the 3 day cycle
yeah,
factor.
but that's number 42 out of all games, ladies and gentlemen.
Like that's
Yeah.
like, like it's not that far off. Number 44 was also a Zelda game. Do you want to guess which that was?
Well, I know Ocarina of Time's their top, or at least it was.
Number
I don't know
one?
if it still is. Yeah. Number 44, I'm going to say A Link to the Past.
Link to the Past is not on Metacritic because it's too
Oh,
old.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
no, you're right.
But I will include Link to the Past 4 Swords is number 41.
Okay. 44, Twilight Princess?
Yep.
Okay.
You got it. You got it. Yep.
I feel like there's a big crossover since they're both darker in tone Zelda games. A lot of people who like Majora's Mask also love Twilight Princess.
that was the thing too. I'm like, oh, this is the first of 3 times they've done kind of this thing, and I went, no, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess really aren't anything alike, so never mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Wind Waker is number 29 on the list, right next to 28, which is Tears of the Kingdom. So, like, as far as overall acclaim of these games goes, I think it's unlike. I mean, you can compare it to Final Fantasy and Mario and whatever, but I think it's unlike any other franchise, really. And I think out of all of the games that we've reviewed, besides maybe Mario 3 or something, I think this is the most referenced game with other video games. Like, they use Majora's Mask in, like, every Zelda game after this. I'm exaggerating, but...
No, because Breath of the Wild had the DLC outfit
Tears of the
thing.
Kingdom has it.
It's
in
funny for A Link
game
Between Worlds that there's a Majora's Mask in A Link Between Worlds.
For a game that's supposedly so maligned by the fan base, it gets an awful lot of love in the other games. So
I don't know if it's maligned by the fan base. I think it's maligned by people who are outside the fan base who couldn't handle the 3-day cycle. That's the most common complaint I hear is like, oh, I couldn't do the 3-day cycle. So I think hardcore Zelda fans, though, it typically is ranked in top 5s.
I think once you get the flow of the game, the 3-day cycle thing isn't even like a stressor or anything.
No, in fact, once you have the song where you can slow time down, you have too much time. And I finish a dungeon and then have like a whole day left over to just like get some resources. Yeah. I think one of the reasons this is one of my favorite Zelda games is the fact that there's only 4 dungeons too. So obviously each dungeon gives you a heart at the end, like any other Zelda game, but that only gives you 4 hearts. So they had to create so many side quests for this game to give you what is, I think, still, well, unless you count the shrines in Breath of the Wild, the most heart pieces in a Zelda game, because they didn't have a full set of dungeons to work with. So you need more heart pieces to make up that heart count. And they have so many side quests in this game, and side quests are always my favorite thing to do. So yeah, I think that's a big contributing factor.
I think you get to know the characters really well in this game too, because of that cycle. So again, it adds to the storytelling and everything else, but I don't know. There's just...
Did any of you catch the Star Fox Easter egg in the mask screen?
There's a Star Fox Easter egg.
The row of masks makes up the Star Fox team. The Keaton mask is Fox. Then you've got the bird mask is Falco. The bunny ears, Peppy. The toad mask, Slippy. And then I've seen people argue that this counts or not, but there's a pig mask at the end for could be Pigma.
Okay.
And yeah, the Star Fox team in the second row.
That's a cool thing. I didn't even notice that. So.
My only critique of this game, and I got to get it off my chest every time I discuss this game, is I think they really dropped the ball on the swords. The Razor Sword, super cool, such a prominent part of the advertising, and you only get to hold it for like a couple of days before you upgrade it to the Gilded Sword. And it's the better sword, and the Gilded Sword's ugly, and the Great Fairy Sword is ugly. They're like the 2 worst looking swords in the entire franchise to me. And I really wish you got to hold on to that Razor Sword. So -1 point for that.
See, I thought you were gonna get on the 3DS remake.
that's what I want to ask about. Like, do you remember your initial reactions to the 3DS remake?
My initial reactions were like all the quality of life improvements were great. You being able to save more often was great. And like they improved the bomber's notebook, and they even have, I can't remember if you could warp to a specific time. I think you could. I think they changed it so like you could, they allowed you to basically speed up time to a specific time. So you didn't have to stand there and wait for things to happen. So that was good. The only thing is, the way they changed all 4 bosses of the 4 dungeons is they made them more uniform, and it kind of made them less special. They gave them all a giant eyeball to attack, which like some of them you had to trigger the eyeball to come out, but it was still there. And I feel like it took away from the uniqueness of each boss. It especially made I forget his name, the guy who dances in the bats, the first boss. It made him a lot less special in my opinion. So yeah, I did not like the changes to the bosses. I did not like that there's an area that basically tells you where to go if you get stuck, which is, another thing Nintendo does to make their games too easy for younger players sometimes.
Again, I think that's a modern thing.
Yeah. And it should have been like optional. Like, I don't know, I can just ignore it and not use it, but I would have liked it to be something I could turn on or off.
That was around the time they started I think 3DS was the beginning of it, but they might have done it on the Wii. Like, if you died too many times, the game would play itself for you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't understand the point of this, but
what else do I think of it? It's been a while since I've played it because the boss thing really did kind of ruin it for me. But there are some genuine improvements there. It's just the boss thing really ruins it for me.
Majora's Mask is 8th best-selling of all time, and 9th if you include the remakes at 6.6 copies, which is just it's a lot. I mean that's a lot for the time. For it being, do we call it a sequel? Or whatever we call it. But
yeah, it's a sequel because it references the other game.
Yeah. So it did really well. I've a Majora's Mask run in Breath of the Wild where like basically I get the paraglider, I go get Majora's Mask, and then I try to complete all 120 shrines as fast as possible. Well, relatively. I mean, I'm not like timing myself, but just I think the lore for Majora's Mask has always been very, very cool. I think like this game came out when I was 11 years old, and at least in my friend groups, Majora's Mask was always seen as like the cool, more dark, more edgy, more like the cool kids played this one and the blah blah this one. Like, I've always thought the lore and just the overall vibe of this game was cool, despite not really enjoying playing it that much. I'll be honest. Like, I so much love and respect for this game, but for me playing it, I don't like it as much as other Zelda games. I guess I'll put it that way. I do feel a little bit stressed still sometimes.
Well, we'll get into how much you liked it in a second with the ranking, but I can feel us winding down here, and I want to point out 2 more things that I had in my notes, which is unused content, which we don't normally go into, but I think these are really cool. So in the original game design, in the files for the game, there's a human Link mask. It looks like a Link face. And it's unknown what it was going to be used for, but it was most likely part of basically you were originally going to be able to use a mask to become adult Link from Ocarina of Time, and they would just reuse that model. And it would probably have been used for things like getting into the milk bar or something you needed to be an adult for. No one really knows, but they took it out of the game. And they basically redesigned that character model and redesigned that mask to become the Fierce Deity mask, which also was something you were able to use in the entire overworld at one point, but now you can only use it at the very end of the game. So I thought that was really cool to just think about being adult Link in this game, like Ocarina of Time. And the other thing that I think is worth looking up if you haven't done it is there's cut content, cut animation for when Link is learning different abilities from the fairies. They're adorable. There are these cut little animations where like he's like working out. Like in one he's doing push-ups, and another one he's doing like sit-ups, and then there's one where like the fairy is like holding his arm and showing him like how to put his arm out straight so he can do the magic twirl that he does. It's animations. I don't know why they didn't make it into the game because they're detailed and very adorable.
I think a Link mask would have been creepy.
Well, I would have liked the fierce deity to be just usable in the overworld. Like you get that mask by collecting all the masks in the game. So it's like it's a reward, but it's a reward you can literally only use in one room. So I would like to be able to use that on the overworld and my magic laser discs at people that come out of your sword when you use it. So yeah, let's get into rankings. I'll jump right out ahead and say I'm putting this is my new number 2.
Oh wow.
A to the Past still ranks higher to me, and this is not my number 2 Zelda, but it's my number 2 Zelda that we've reviewed so far. Okay. So, and some of them we won't even review because they're not on Switch Online. But yeah, this is my new number 2 game, below A Link to the Past and above Toe Jam and Earl.
Wow, so this is your second. How many Zelda games do you have in your top 10 now?
Let's see. A Link to the Past, Majora's Mask, Minish Cap, Ocarina of Time, Link's Awakening. So 5 of my top 10.
Wow. And only reviewed 5.
Yeah. Oh, it's my favorite franchise, you know? It's a ride or die.
So 5 of the 10. I'm similar to you in that aspect. But this one's going to be number 11 for me. Again, it's not a game I'm ever going to be finished with, I don't think, like in my lifetime. I think it's a game I'll always go back to. It's not a game I enjoy as much as other Zelda games. So yeah, it's going to be number 11, and which means 5 of my top 11 are Zelda games.
Okay, so 5 of your top 11 instead of 10. Not that different.
So
yeah, the order's quite different. Yeah, exactly.
This was one of the harder games to rank for me. I like the game more than Ocarina of Time, but I feel like Ocarina of Time's a better gameplay, if that makes sense.
See, I had a hard time. I was comparing it to Minish Cap a lot because that's my number 4, and I was like, do I like this more than Minish Cap? Like it. I had to do a lot of thinking there because they're very different games. But anyway, go on.
So that put Majora at 21. So it's under Ocarina and it's above Jet Force Gemini. It's really good. I really like it, but I don't know. There's just I can't quite put it higher than that. I mean, what do I get? Three Zelda games in my top 10, but who knows how long that'll last. But no, it's a weird instance. Like I Majora's Mask more, but I think the other one's a better game. So
yeah, I think my top 10 will remain dominated by Zelda no matter how many we do here, because I've said before, I think if I had to, I could cut my video game playing down to just Zelda and Final Fantasy and be okay.